Welcome to Once Upon a Coin, documenting the ongoing history of blockchain and cryptocurrency. And as always, I'm your storyteller, Jason Cassidy. Today's story has us continuing our journey through the early years of crypto when quite literally, truth was stranger than fiction. While it's fair to say that 2014 was a pretty rough year with some events taking place that brought the whole digital currency sector down to its knees, this wasn't the worst of it. Not by a long shot. Bitcoin had experienced some astronomical gains over the previous years, which resulted in a lot of money, companies, and ideas all flooding into the industry. And while some of those ideas were pretty good, and some of that money got invested into logical places, that was very much the exception to the rule. Basically, the party had been raging for a very long time now, and last call had finally arrived. What came next was a crypto hangover that would make even Captain Jack Sparrow himself blush a bit. So hang on tight, because I'm going to be telling you about what could quite possibly be the craziest time the industry has ever experienced. This is the story of crypto in 2015.
Sun cast a shadow, a digital line is coming over the mountain and over your mind. Double down your Bitcoin, hang on for the ride. We're moving into the future, one block at a time. We're moving into the future, one block at a time.
The dust hadn't even settled yet from the disastrous events of 2014 when the calendar flipped over. New year, same old problems. Believe it or not, they had managed to actually get worse somehow. The price of Bitcoin dipped below $200 US in January, trading in the $100 USD range for the first time since late 2013. It really did feel like the industry had regressed several years, wiping out a ton of progress and value. However, that wasn't quite entirely true. There were some events that gave us at least a glimmer of hope that there could be better days coming in the future. On January 26, Coinbase launched the first licensed cryptocurrency exchange in the United States. And while this didn't do anything to move the price of crypto in the right direction, it was still really big news. For starters, this event showed the continued faith in crypto that startups like Coinbase had. But more importantly, it showed that the US was serious about getting into the blockchain market in a big way. To show you just how much traction crypto still had, in that same month of January, the Winklevoss twins announced that they would be bringing a regulated crypto exchange to the US called Gemini. And just like Coinbase, this too would be a fully regulated exchange, which the twins dubbed the NASDAQ of Bitcoin. January had some more big hits in store for us because Tether, the USD-backed stablecoin that was created just a year prior, was now debuting on the Bitfinex exchange. Traders and investors alike loved the idea of having a USD-based hedge within crypto itself. This was really great news, because if you were looking for a safe place to ride out the considerable volatility that crypto was known for, well, you really had only one choice up until now: sell into your fiat-based national currency on an exchange. But now, with the advent of Tether, or USDT as it's better known by its ticker symbol, you now had options. You could keep your capital firmly entrenched within crypto and still enjoy all the benefits of having a stable USD-backed investment that can be bought and sold instantly for another token. Tether would go on to become a major player in the industry in the years that followed, but in 2015 it was still in its infancy and was more of a novel innovation for curious cryptonauts. Just 1 month later in February, a new update to the BIT license was announced. This meant that legitimate US exchanges like Coinbase and Gemini would have to apply for and then retain the BIT license if they wanted the pleasure of doing business with New York residents. And yet more signs that crypto was slowly but surely being taken seriously could be seen when the payment startup Stripe announced that they would be accepting Bitcoin. The institutional side of crypto kept evolving in the early months of 2015, and one event in particular made it very clear that this was now a trend. On March 11th, it was reported that Blythe Masters, the ex-JP Morgan Wall Street veteran, had jumped ship and taken on the role of CEO at Digital Asset Holdings, a crypto-based financial technology company. Masters had helped pioneer the credit derivatives market in the 1990s and was held in high regard when it came to the upper echelon of finance. Seeing her make the jump over to the crypto space sent a clear message to Wall Street that blockchain was where the future of finance would be living and playing. To drive this point home further, the Nasdaq demonstrated that they certainly weren't deterred by the nasty bear market that was now firmly gripping crypto. In May, they announced they were conducting a blockchain trial to investigate the feasibility of using the technology in the future to facilitate the transfer and storage of shares. This was the trend in 2015. While the prices and retail action had died down, Wall Street was using this opportunity to scoop up deals on the cheap. They were laying the foundational work for when the market would eventually return. And return it would, just not quite yet. Also in May, the fallout from the Silk Road bust, which had taken place in 2013, was now coming to a head. The legal process had taken an arduous year and a half to navigate through, in part due to the complexity of the situation. For starters, 2 federal agents that were assigned to the case ended up being charged for fraud due to the misusing of funds that were held in Bitcoin while on assignment. Basically, the 2 agents went into business for themselves, hoping to pocket some of the confiscated Bitcoin. But their charge wasn't the worst that came out of the trial. No, that was saved for Ross Ulbricht, or Dread Pirate Roberts as he was better known online. On May 29th, Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on charges of narcotics distribution, computer hacking, and conspiracy. This ruling was met with widespread criticism and condemnation due to the harshness of the sentence relative to the rather lax actions taken against the same level of crime in the traditional financial sector. This triggered a movement to get more attention around Ulbricht's case in an effort to create the right environment to get a reduction in his sentence. To this day, there is a Free Ross campaign that is very much alive in the cryptosphere in the hopes that Ross will see the outside of a jail cell. During the spring of 2015, the price of Bitcoin rebounded slightly, going back up into the $200 USD range and basically stayed there. This was a bear market, and during these times, good news had almost no impact on the price due to the overly pessimistic sentiment that most of the market traders had at this time. As the summer approached, the market was becoming desperate for any type of good news, and thankfully, the market got just that. Ethereum's long-awaited public launch finally took place on July 30th via the Frontier mainnet release. To be honest, it wasn't much to start off with, but that really didn't matter either because the chain was now live and a world of innovations was about to spring forth. Smart contracts were now possible for developers to create with ease, and with the backing of a proof-of-work consensus, miners could get involved and help secure the network. The future was looking mighty bright for the newest kid on the block. Chain.
2015 was a fun time for crypto too. The Ethereum launching and everything, I was one of the early adopters of that. I knew the person of Ethereum that wrote the first smart contract, ended up going out to Ethereum Denver and meeting a bunch of the foundation people. This was the year that we started to really push CureCoin. We were doing crazy points per day, which they reward for folding proteins, and became top rank on folding at home.
The launch of Ethereum as a smart contract blockchain got a lot of attention given that it opened up the world to not hundreds, but literally thousands of new use cases. One of those use cases was the ability to create a predictions market, and a particular serial crypto entrepreneur decided that he was going to make this a reality. Jeremy Gardner introduced Augur, the first blockchain-based predictions market, and on August 17th, an ICO, or initial coin offering, was held for it. Now, if you're wondering if there is any appetite for investment into this type of offering during a bear market, well, let me put any doubts to rest. Augur raised $600,000 on Bitcoin and Ethereum on the first day alone, showcasing that despite the low morale that was infecting the industry, there were still people that were hopeful that crypto had a future and they were willing to bet big on it. This was historic in the sense that it was the very first Ethereum token to launch an ICO. The network would go on to see thousands of tokens follow suit in the coming years, but it was Augur who did it first. August saw more history take place, and this time it was of a controversial nature. And I mean really controversial. The first seeds of the future Bitcoin civil war were planted when 2 of Bitcoin's well-known developers, Mike Hearn and Gavin Andreessen, released Bitcoin XT. There is a lot to the story, but the gist is that Bitcoin XT is a patch that sits on top of Bitcoin Core, and looked to opt out of Bitcoin's 1 megabyte block size limit. They had concerns about the network's ability to scale to meet future adoption, and the Bitcoin XT fork would help raise this limit considerably over time. They released Bitcoin XT on August 15th, and at that point, a threshold of 75% of the miners adopting the new software was set. However, As it turned out, there was not enough people willing to abandon the 1 megabyte block size limit, and thus Bitcoin XT ultimately failed in its mission to free Bitcoin of the arbitrary block size cap. It's worth noting that this proposal was highly contested, just as it is today when we look at the fallout from the Bitcoin Civil War between BTC, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin SV, who are all fighting for the official title of Bitcoin. The main concern was that larger blocks would make the network inherently more centralized, and thus less secure. So while this issue was put to rest for now, it would not be going away, and in fact, it would go on to become one of the most talked about and contentious topics in crypto in the coming years. As the leaves slowly began to turn color and fall off the trees with the coming of the autumn season, nothing was changing with the price of Bitcoin. It was still trading in the $200 USD range, which made for a pretty boring year when it came to the price, especially considering the crazy rollercoaster ride Bitcoin went on in the prior years. Better times were coming for Bitcoin, but to make it to that point, cryptonauts would have to hunker down because the bear market would last for a while yet. September saw the introduction of a new player to the scene in R3, who quickly formed a consortium of 9 commercial banks who would be creating blockchain-based banking solutions. Having realized that they were each spending hundreds of millions of dollars individually on research and development, the group came together to harmonize these efforts. There would be a sizable time and cost savings realized by joining forces, something that I can personally attest to as I was fortunate enough to work with R3 on a weekly basis around this time. The insights that I gained here helped me understand the growing trend of enterprise-level players putting an equal, if not greater, focus on the underlying blockchain tech than they were any of the popular coins of that era. On November 9th, Microsoft announced that they would be expanding their endeavors in crypto well beyond Bitcoin. And they accomplished this by rolling out their blockchain as a service offering via their Azure platform, picking Ethereum as their very first dance partner. This was big news at the time, to see a giant of the tech industry like Microsoft include a blockchain startup like Ethereum in one of their flagship products in Azure. It was another sign of the growing appetite for big business to embrace the underlying technology behind such standouts as Bitcoin and Ethereum. It was now the blockchain itself that people were starting to pay attention to. And the hits just kept on coming, because later that month, the now incredibly successful ERC20 token standard was proposed by Ethereum developer Fabian Vogelsteller. The standard specified a set of criteria that a token must abide by to function in the Ethereum ecosystem. The benefit of the standard being adopted would be that everyone would now have a unified set of rules for how tokens interact with each other and applications running on Ethereum. This proposal was met with a lot of praise, and that sent Fabian down a path of bringing the standard to life. The ERC20 token standard would be credited for being one of the main triggers behind the ICO boom that would take place soon after. As the year was coming to an end, some pretty big things took place, which would help set the foundation for what would later come in 2016. It started with the introduction of segregated witness by Bitcoin developer Peter Wella at the Scaling Bitcoin conference held in Hong Kong on December 7th. SegWit, as it's better known in the industry, was an alternative scaling solution proposal that was in stark contrast to Bitcoin XT, which was released earlier that summer. With SegWit, no hard fork of the Bitcoin blockchain would be required. It could all be done via soft fork, and thus would not require all Bitcoin users to upgrade their clients in a joint effort. SegWit's secret scaling sauce was that it used different parts of Bitcoin, like the Merkle tree. In a nutshell, Bitcoin would take out the digital signatures in a transaction and store them in the Merkle tree in the Coinbase component of a transaction. Or additionally, it could also store them in the input of a generated transaction. In doing this, the change would make transactions appear smaller in size to current nodes. What this meant was that more transactions could be included in a Bitcoin block, even if those blocks were limited to the 1 megabyte cap size that was enforced by the protocol. So nodes would not have to see or deal with transaction signature data due to it being stored in a part of the blockchain that they wouldn't recognize. This novel concept was widely celebrated, and it helped set the tone for 2016 in the block size debate that would soon escalate into a full-blown civil war for Bitcoin. Ironically, just one day later, one of the biggest bombshells that the cryptocurrency industry would ever bear witness to took place. Wired, a popular tech outlet, published a story claiming that they had figured out the identity behind the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, and his name was Craig Wright. And just like the Dorian Nakamoto fiasco from a year prior, this story held all kinds of intrigue for not just cryptonauts, but the mainstream media as well. Even the average Joe was now getting interested in learning more about this unfolding mystery. The documents that Wired obtained and subsequently leaked created an entire shitstorm across the industry as people were anxious to figure out the person behind the most powerful invention in financial human history. This started a controversy that is still raging on a decade later. The identity of Satoshi Nakamoto and the veracity behind Craig Wright's claims to be the creator of Bitcoin. This topic is far too complex and downright fascinating to cover in just this episode. And that's why you're going to want to keep your eye out for future episodes of this show, because there's a very good chance we're going to cover this topic in the near future. And we'll close out the year with the Linux Foundation, who decided to get into the blockchain game themselves when they announced the Hyperledger project on December 17th. The project would look to create an enterprise-grade blockchain solution which would help push the limits of DLT, or what distributed ledger technology could achieve. This was yet another move by big business to get involved in crypto, and some of the original members of Hyperledger illustrate this. Names like Cisco, Intel, JP Morgan, and IBM signed on to take part in the joint venture. If the public wasn't seeing the trend of enterprise players getting into the blockchain space in a big way, then they had no choice but to acknowledge the trend now. And that about wraps it up for 2015. Well, just about. Bitcoin was starting to make a move, and while it wasn't like anything we'd seen in the previous bull market, it did end the year in the $400 USD range. This gave people some hope that the new year of 2016 would bring about a change in fortune. While 2016 did bring some change, it probably wasn't the type of change that cryptonauts were expecting. What did take place once the calendar flipped over to 2016 was surreal in nature. And that's exactly what we're going to be looking at next episode, so be sure to check out the story of crypto in 2016, because you're probably not going to believe what the heck happened. I hope you enjoyed today's stroll down memory lane. Until next time, have fun and enjoy life, my friends. I'll be back soon with another incredible story to tell you.